Hello everyone, welcome to another podcast. Ben Lister here again, here for episode 29 of the Chatbox podcast. Today's guest was Shaun Tilley, so here it is. Hello and welcome to another Chatbox podcast. It's episode 39 of the Chatbox podcast. How are you doing today? Right, let's crack on. As you know, each week I have a guest to talk about their career or their job. So let's crack on with this week's guest. It's broadcaster Shaun Tilley. Hello, Shaun. Welcome along.
Hello, Ben. How are you? It's a pleasure to be with you on your wonderful podcast.
I'm fine. Thank you, sir. How are you?
Yes, I'm delightful. Thanks. Yeah, it's a beautiful sunny day here. What's the weather like where you are? Is it nice?
Yeah, it's reasonable.
Reasonable.
Yeah, because as I say, I listen to a lot of radio shows.
Okay. And who are your favourite broadcasters at the moment then?
Me, obviously, Dr. Fox.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Fox. You like him, yeah?
And also some people on Hull Kingston radio as well, like Darren Leatham and Pete Mills, where I do a bit of voluntary work. Brilliant.
So is that a community radio station in Hull, is it?
Yeah.
Ah, right. Well, Hull has got a special place in my heart. I've got a lot of time for Hull. I was on the radio a couple of times up there. I worked at Viking, and I also worked for a couple of years on KCFM 99.8. So, yeah, I had some good times in Hull, and I've still got some good pals up there as well.
And also a person I didn't realise was a radio presenter up until recently, Ted Robbins.
Kate Robbins, is she on the radio now?
No, Ted.
Oh, well, yes, of course. Ted is Kate's brother, isn't he? And yeah, I think he's been on. I'm pretty sure I caught him on the radio quite a few years ago. I think he works on one of the BBC local stations up north, doesn't he?
Yeah, because I remember him from the Phoenix Nights days.
I do. Yeah. Ted Robbins, of course. Yeah. Very capable comedian, a funny man, and a great warm-up guy as well. I think that I went to a TV show quite a few years ago now, and he was the warm-up guy for it. And this was a television show that I was invited on, and he was doing the warm-up with the audience, and he was terrific. Very, very funny.
You may know a person who I know then, Martin Kellner.
I know of him. I don't know him, but I know of him, yes.
He does a bit of work for talk radio.
Yeah, well, again, I'm very aware of him, and I know that I think he was on Radio 2 for a while, wasn't he? Long time ago. And
one of my friends worked for talk radio.
And who's that?
Ian Collins.
I don't know him, but talk radio is not a radio station that I ever listen to. Maybe I should do. But I listen to Talk Sport. I really, really like Talk Sport. That's a station that I listen to quite often.
I sometimes listen to it for people like Kevin O'Sullivan, Mark Dolan, Julia Hartley-Brewer.
Right. Okay. I must give it a listen one day.
And they also have an ex-advisor to the government, Peter Cardwell.
My goodness me. So they've got all the heavy hitters there. I really should have a listen.
Because they have a few ex-government ministers to give their take on what's going on.
Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because when you watch football on the TV or when you listen to football on the radio, they've got ex-footballers there, giving their professional opinions on things. So I suppose if you're talking about parliamentary issues and government issues, then, you should have a few ex-MPs or former advisors to MPs to make sense of it all, I suppose.
Anyway, yeah.
Yes.
Shall we get on? Because I've got 5 questions.
Let's get on, man.
Okay. You ready to rumble in the jungle? Yeah. Let's go for it. Question 1. Where did you start your broadcast career?
Well, I'd like a lot of people, I suppose, Ben. I started on hospital radio in Swansea in South Wales, where I come from originally. And then I did a bit of university radio, and then I sort of quickly progressed to Swansea Sound, which no longer exists. But it's one of those, heritage ILR stations, as we used to call them, meaning independent local radio, for anybody that's not familiar with that abbreviation. And I wasn't there that long because I left to move to London. And then when I went to London, I was an assistant. I used to be a Saturday helper at Capital Radio in the old Euston Tower, the old building on Euston Road in central London, just at the top of Tottenham Court Road, where it joins with the Euston Road, and opposite Warren Street Tube Station there. And I used to help out Alan Freeman on a Saturday morning, and then Kenny Everett would come bounding in the studio to do his program following Fluff. So that was a great sort of education for me. And then very soon after that, I started working for Radio Caroline for a while out in the North Sea. Then I got 2 amazing breaks. I did some work for BBC World Service, and the programs were produced at Radio 1. So although you'd go to Bush House, which was the building which housed the BBC World Service, and you would host the programs there, they were actually produced by the Radio 1 music department. So I would go into Radio 1 and meet with producers who would be overseeing me when I did these World Service programs. And from there, I got another fantastic break in my career, and it's something that people still talk about to me to this very day. And that was the time that I spent with Radio Luxembourg, a very famous radio station, the Great 208, which again was national radio all over the UK and Europe. And I was there right to the end. I co-hosted the last ever night of transmissions on Radio Luxembourg. So those were the sort of early years of my career, really, Ben.
Brilliant start to your career.
Yes, I was very lucky. Yeah, absolutely terrific. Because I was very young. Excuse me. I was, I'm talking about a period now from being in my late teens into my early 20s, and I think after Kid Jensen, I was the next youngest DJ ever to work for Radio Luxembourg, and I think I might have actually been, I was a little bit younger than he was when he got the job there. As you say, it was an incredible start to my career, and it really set me off on my way. I've been very, very fortunate that apart from taking a break in between stations, which has been, my decision as opposed to one that was made for me, I've pretty much been in employment for 37 years nearly in radio. So I've been very, very fortunate. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Do you also that's brilliant as well. Question 2, who were your inspirations in broadcasting growing up?
Well, I had a few, to be honest. There isn't one specifically because there's different, as you well know, being a broadcaster, there's different areas of radio that make great broadcasters or great DJs, whatever you want to call them. But I suppose creatively, it would be people like Noel Edmonds, whose breakfast show on Radio 1 I used to wake up to every morning, like millions of other people, and that was certainly an inspiration. Kenny Everett creatively is everybody's inspiration, although, I was a bit young. Although I was around when he was on Radio 1, I was a bit young to listen to him when he was on Radio 1. But when I moved to London especially, and as I mentioned earlier on, when I used to help out at Capital on a Saturday morning, I used to see Kenny every week. He used to come in after Alan Freeman and do his program. I was honoured to be able to spend a little bit of time with him, not much, but a little bit of time chatting with him. And as we used to have the same conversation every week, really, to be honest with you, because in 6 days, he was such an enormous star. He had a television program in those days, as well as the show that he had on the radio at Capital. And in 6 days, he would forget completely what he talked to me about the previous Saturday, because, of course, he was an enormous star. Was around all kinds of people during the week. So, but I had that time with him, and he was definitely an inspiration. And then, people like, I've always done chart shows. I've always been a chart show presenter throughout my career. And I used to love listening to Simon Bates doing the chart show on Radio 1. He did that brilliantly. And before him, Tom Brown used to do the top 20 on Radios 1 and 2. That's a great memory for me growing up. Alan Freeman was the ultimate chart show presenter. Some would say the ultimate DJ, but I mean, because Fluff was such an important part of my career in the early days, and he looked after me so well. I mean, he got me into Capital. It was through writing letters to him from my home in South Wales that he invited me to London, and I sat in on his show a few times, and then eventually I would come in every week and help him out. And he put a major word in for me at Radio Luxembourg when I got the job there, because he had been a Radio Luxembourg DJ himself in London. So Alan Freeman was a major influence on my career. And then two other people who, one of them is still one of my best friends to this day, and also one of my radio heroes, Paul Burnett. Paul Burnett, the funniest guy I've ever known in radio. Not somebody who will do sketches on the radio and do all sorts of characters like a Steve Wright, like a Kenny Everett, like a Noel Edmonds. But Paul is just the funniest guy naturally. He just opens his mouth and something funny comes out of it usually. A wonderful raconteur, you know, the way that he relates real life on the radio. And he's the first person that I actually remember doing that kind of content. So one of my best friends, but also one of my ultimate heroes. And then another great friend of mine who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but was a massive inspiration for me listening late at night to Radio Luxembourg. He also used to do the chart show on Radio Luxembourg, and little did I know that I would take that chart show over and host it myself just a few years later, and that would be Bob Stewart, who had one of the most incredible voices ever. Arguably the greatest voice on UK radio, certainly through the period that he was on the air. And it was an incredible American voice, which was astonishing, really, considering that he came from Liverpool. He was a Scouser. He never went to America, I don't think, until he was in his mid-30s. So those would be my my inspirations for lots of different reasons, because there are different facets to what makes a great music radio broadcaster, and each and every one of those was great at their particular skill, if you like.
Some people say the ultimate chart show host was like on Radio 1. You might agree or disagree, I don't know. The listeners or viewers might disagree or agree, I don't know. But some people say like Bruno Brooks was a brilliant host.
Well, Bruno Brooks was a fantastic Radio 1 chart show DJ. Bruno's a good friend of mine. And
people like Neil Fox and Stephanie Hurst, when they hosted the chart show on Capital, they used that fast-paced nature of Bruno Brooks's style.
I don't recall hearing. I guess I must have heard Neil Fox doing the chart show because I was on commercial radio. You know, big stations up north, Radio City, and in Liverpool and Clyde in Glasgow, and stations like that I worked for when Foxy would have been doing the chart show. But Bruno Brooks, certainly I've got memories of Bruno Brooks doing the chart show on Radio 1. And in actual fact, Bruno did the chart on Radio 1 at the same time that I did the chart on Radio Luxembourg. And quite often when I would be in London and we'd go to parties, whether they be radio station get-togethers, you know, like Radio Industry Awards or pop star parties, you know, when a new band or artist would release an album, you'd go to the press party. So I used to bump into Bruno when I was back in the UK. And we had this mutual respect for each other. You know, he was a big fan of Radio Luxembourg, even though he's a Radio 1 DJ. So he would be very encouraging to me with the way that I did the chart on Luxy, and I loved the way that he did the chart on Radio 1. And you know, we're good friends to this day. In fact, we're working on a project together at the moment. So yes, Bruno, fantastic.
About the different chart shows, you get the same music, but it's presented differently, and it's a different package and style.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's no point sounding like anybody else, and you do the chart show in your own way. We all have inspirations. And, you know, when we're starting off, we might take a little bit of somebody that we admire. But the longer that you do it, obviously, you develop your own style. And I don't think any of the chart show presenters that we've talked about right now, I don't think any of them are the same. I think we all have to generate a certain amount of pace into it to make it exciting. But everybody, as you say, is unique. They have their own style. I don't listen to the chart show very much these days, but it must be very difficult, I would think, to make it as exciting as it used to be, because obviously, even though charts are still important, they don't have the gravitas and the importance that they once had in the glory days. You know, the boom era of single sales in the UK and people rushing out and buying records and things like that. Those days have gone now because the chart's very different. It's made up primarily of downloads, and I would imagine it's quite not impossible, but I would imagine it's quite difficult now to generate this sort of excitement that used to be around the chart show in the glory days, when, you know, the singles chart was king and everybody wanted to know every week what number one was going to be. You know, all the family were huddled around the TV watching Top of the Pops, or huddled around the radio listening to it on a Sunday to find out the latest chart positions, or a Tuesday lunchtime when I was a child, because when I was a teenager, the new chart used to come out on a Tuesday lunchtime, and we'd all be huddled around the radio at school listening to somebody like Paul Burnett or Johnny Walker before him, and after that, people like DLT and Gary Davis, and then latterly Bruno. You know, listening to the chart and sort of hedging our bets as to who was at number one. They were exciting times.
And you also forgotten that John Peel.
Well, he didn't do a chart show though, John Peel, did he?
No, I mean as a radio presenter. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, you could talk about everybody, couldn't you? I mean, John Peel was fantastic. I mean, you know, he isn't necessarily somebody that, you know, inspired me when I was younger, because I wasn't all that into the music that he played. Some of the music that he played on his late night program on Radio 1, I loved. I mean, I'm a big fan of punk and new wave and you know, two-tone and ska music and all that stuff that sort of came around in the late 1970s, very, very early 1980s. John Peel played quite a bit of that, and when he did, I used to listen in and I loved it. What I did love about John Peel, what I most admired about him was the fact that he was so entertaining in between the records. So sometimes I would listen to John Peel just to hear what he was going to say, even if I didn't particularly like the tracks that he was playing that night, because he was so naturally funny in the way that Paul Burnett, who I mentioned earlier on, was very, very funny without having to try, naturally. Just a very amusing person. I thought that of John Peel as well. And I especially like John Peel hosting Top of the Pops with my dear friend, Kid Jensen, who I love very much. Peel and Jensen used to do Top of the Pops together as a double act, and they were brilliant at that. So yes, I have all the time in the world for John Peel's memory. He was superb, and I didn't know him, but I was in his company a couple of times, and he was also a very, very nice man.
Mr. Glastonbury.
Yeah, again, that's a period of Radio 1 that I didn't listen to. You know, I mean, I was really a Radio 1 listener in the 70s and the 80s, and of course, all the Glastonbury stuff came afterwards. But yeah, I mean, I used to occasionally watch the highlights of Glastonbury on BBC television, and John would occasionally be rocking up there as a presenter in his own sort of unique style, and everything that John Peel did in terms of presenting, whether it be on TV and on radio, I loved it.
Brilliant. Question 3, what is your favourite part about the job?
I suppose people hopefully thinking that you're pretty good at it, or that you're okay at it, you know, and they like what you do, and they get in contact with you and they say that they like what you do. I think that's the most important thing for me. I'm very glad that I've made a career out of it, that I haven't had to do any other job, Ben. I mean, you know, that's a privilege. Some people have periods in their life where they have to do another job, and I've never had to do another job. This is the only job that I've ever had, and I was on the radio professionally in my last year in school. And and I've been on the radio ever since, and I've been paid for it, and that's a privilege. The fact that people still think I'm okay enough to pay me a wage to do it, So that I work for the BBC now and have done for a number of years, and the fact that the BBC still wants to employ me to do it, I mean, how lucky am I? That's absolutely wonderful. And then when you get listeners that react to what you do and they say that they enjoy what you do every week, then that has to be the best part of it. And as important to me as my radio career is my DJ career. I still work in clubs. I'm still a club DJ. I've been in clubs as long as I've been on the radio. I'm coming up for 37 years, in nightclubs. And okay, we haven't been able to do that for the last 16 months. But as I speak to you now, we've had the green light in England to get the nightclub sector back open. A week Friday, the 23rd, I should be going back into the clubs. I'm booked to do gigs in the London and sort of Berkshire and Surrey areas. So I should go back doing my gigs, and having that immediate reaction when you're playing a tune in a nightclub and the floor is full and people are responding to what you're doing and they're loving it. They got their hands in the air and making all sorts of noises, appreciation and things like that. That immediate reaction that you get from people, you can't buy that. You either are lucky enough to have it or you're not. So the reaction is the number one thing for me. That's the best thing about the job, whether that be a club reaction, punters in a club. I don't like the word punters, but, club goers, people on the dance floor and listeners, and you become friends with them as well. What's not to like? It's terrific.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Question 4. How has COVID affected your life and line of work?
Well, going back to what I've just mentioned there over the last 16 months, obviously I haven't been able to do my club gigs, and that, primarily in terms of just loving what I do, it's been hard, not being able to do that for 16 months. There is a financial impact, of course there is, because, we're well paid for doing that. And I don't care who you are, you miss that. That's a big chunk of the money that you earn, that's what you have done the job all these years for, to be in that position where you can still do it. But it hasn't really impacted on us too much. I've got a wonderful family life, I've got a brilliant wife. I've got amazing kids, 5 amazing kids, 3 of them all grown up, and then I've got 2 at home with us. 2 little ones, although they're growing up fast now as well. And the plus side of that has been that I've had that much more time to spend with my family. And we're fortunate that we've been in a position where it hasn't affected us financially, our standard of life. We've been able to enjoy our life, and we're very grateful for that, massively grateful for that, because there are some people who have been left in the most awful predicament, and their lifestyles have changed dramatically because of the way that the last 16 months has panned out. And I'm hugely fortunate that I've not been put in that position, and I've been able to carry on the radio, of course, because I've had a home studio set up for many, many years. So when this whole situation kicked in, I was very well equipped to carry on doing radio from home. That was very easy for me. And I've been able to carry on working for not just the BBC, but also commercial radio, because I have 2 radio shows every week that go out on a number of commercial stations in the UK and also abroad. So in terms of radio, I've not been affected at all. It's just the gigs, and I can't wait to get back to them.
Yeah, and also when you're in the radio studio, it's good that you listen to music sometimes.
Yeah, it's a funny thing with that, because sometimes I need to have a break from it, because I'm completely, and have been for all my life, really, because a long time before I started on the radio, and I've been on the radio for 37 years in September of this year, but a long time before I started doing radio, I was music mad, when from my earliest memories. When it's your job, when it's all consuming, particularly when you're in clubs like I am, doing 2-3 gigs a week still, and also playing music on the radio, I like to have a break from it sometimes. I when I'm in the car, for instance, driving to the studios that, because I don't just do shows from home, I work out of 2 or 3 BBC studios as well. So when I'm in the car and I'm driving around, I don't listen to music. I listen to speech radio, whether that be 5 Live from the BBC or Talk Sport. I don't tend to listen to radio very much in the car because it's all consuming. It's in my life all the time. And it's part of my job, as well as seeing myself being part of the radio industry. I also see myself being part of the entertainment industry, the music industry, because I play records on the radio. And so I see myself part of that business as well. I don't just have friends that are fellow DJs and broadcasters, but I also have friends who are musicians. Some of them are well known. Some of them are, pop stars that have had really good careers. And through, working with them, doing shows with them and interviews with them and introducing them on stage and knowing them as long as I have, I've become friendly with a few musicians that I really sort of love and respect as well. And they've suffered throughout this whole 16 months terribly. I've got many friends who are musicians and singers, and they've not been able to perform live. And people think they're multi-millionaires and they're not. You know what I mean? They haven't got necessarily financial worries. Their houses may be paid for and things like that, but they still have to carry on earning. It's their career. And you can have lots of money saved up in the bank. You can soon go through that cash alarmingly if you've got a certain lifestyle that you have to maintain and you're not bringing any money in. Go figure. You know what I mean? So I love the music industry. I'm part of the music industry as well as the broadcasting industry, and I'm passionate about it. But sometimes I need to have a break from it and maybe not listen to music round the clock. I think it would drive me mad. You drive me loopy, I think, if I was listening to it all the time. But having said that, on the plus side, there's a lot of really great new music that has been produced during lockdown. Many artists have done some of their most creatively, some of their best work for years, and that's one of the few pluses that come out of lockdown. So it's been nice to listen to friends of mine when they've sent through new tracks and I've been able to play them on the radio. That certainly has been a positive thing. There isn't much else to take as a positive from this time if you are working in the entertainment industry, but I think creatively, there's been some interesting things that have been done during lockdown. And also, like me, my musician friends have really enjoyed the extra time that they've been able to spend with their family, because otherwise we're working so hard and we don't spend enough time with them. So, it's good to take a few positives out of the situation that we've been through during the last 16 months.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. And also, as I said, do you listen to LBC much?
Not really. When I worked in the same building as it, I used to listen to it. Because when I was at Global, for the time that I was, for the years that I was, LBC was one of the many radio stations that we had in that building. So I when I'd be walking around the corridors of Global Radio, I'd hear LBC a lot, and then our studio moved to the same floor as LBC, and it used to play in the corridors. And sometimes I'd sit and have a coffee and listen to it. And but since I left Global, however long ago that is now, 5 years ago maybe, I don't listen to LBC quite as much now, but it has some incredible broadcasters, as a stellar lineup. There's some great talent on there.
Nick Ferrari's one of them.
Yes, yeah, who of course I have heard many times and worked in the same building as. And
have you ever seen him? Spoke to him?
Yeah, I worked with him. Yeah, Global Radio is a huge building in Leicester Square, but we all knew each other. Not especially well. Some you knew better than others, but you can't work in a building like Global and not bump into somebody like Nick Ferrari, as I used to do on regular. I'd bump into Nick Ferrari maybe once or twice a week, and it'd just be a quick hello in the corridor, because there's many people that work in the Global Radio building, not just broadcasters, but producers and engineers and journalists and promotion staff and sales staff and management, obviously. We got to get the management in. But yeah, I worked in the same building for about 7 years. So yeah, and he's an incredible broadcaster. You know, a mighty broadcaster, huge presence, not just on the radio, but also even if you're working in the same building as him.
And there's also a guy as well who I know works for Smooth now, who used to work for Capital, Martin Collins.
Yeah, I mean, we were never at Capital the same time as each other, I don't think. So Martin is not somebody that I know really. But obviously I'm aware of what he's done on the radio. And I mean, if he was on FM and I was on Gold at the same time, there might have been a crossover there. But again, somebody that you see from time to time, but not somebody that I've ever sort of got to know. We've never hung out together, you know.
And I forgot a person who put me in contact with you as well, Paul Newman.
Yes, I think that when I was on Gold, Paul was doing Gold in the Midlands, is it, or maybe somewhere else?
South, but I think.
Yeah, we worked together on an online radio project a couple of years ago. We worked together on that, and yeah, I mean, I've only ever met Paul a couple of times, but he's a nice guy, and yeah, as I say, we did this online thing together a couple of years ago.
Fair. Final question on my list: what advice would you give to young aspiring broadcasters who are starting out?
Well, I would do, you know, kind of the thing that you're doing now. And there's another lad very similar to you who contacted me a while back, and I did an interview for him as well. I think his name is Luke, and he lives in, yeah, that's right. Excuse me, Luke, and he lives in South Wales. And he does a very similar thing to you. And I think the advice that I gave him would be what I'd give you or anybody else that's trying to get into the business. And that's just be proactive, you know, do lots of different things. The good thing about the era that you guys are coming into now is that you can do these podcasts and you can do these radio shows from home and things like that, and do the online radio stations, and you know, just get as much experience as you possibly can. I think that's changed now, because in my day, my contemporaries and colleagues, you know, you would be doing hospital radio or university radio, and of course that gives you great experience. But you guys now, technology-wise, have got the best launch pad ever, because you can do all these things from home, and it's wonderful. And just keep yourself busy, get as much experience as you possibly can, and just carry on knocking on the doors, because at the end of the day, you cannot get better than professional radio experience. So, you know, I think everybody that's trying to do their thing from their home studio or whatever needs to keep an eye on the fact that if you can, still go and work professionally at a radio station. And I know that's much more difficult these days, because in my day, we had tons and tons and tons of radio stations, commercial, independent local radio stations up and down the country. It was a wonderful time. It was a golden era. It was a boom time. And you literally could go from one radio station to another. Now, I know you can't do that anymore, because they're mostly networks now, you know. But where there is professional radio, I think that people should always be inspiring to get there. Try, even though there aren't the opportunities that there once were, and there aren't the number of professional radio stations that they once were, whichever ones are there, people should be trying to get in there. Always try and better yourself. Never lose that ambition. Don't settle for doing it from a home studio. Try and get into a professional radio environment if you can, because you cannot beat that experience of being in a building and not just being around other broadcasters, being around producers, if you're fortunate enough to work with producers, being around top management, being around, goodness me, I mean, the promo staff, the sales staff. For me, working at radio stations, my favorite people were the security guards and the cleaners. And I'm not joking when I say that. The best friends I ever had, apart from a few DJ colleagues, the best friends I have ever had at any of the radio stations I worked at were the security guards, the people working on reception, and the cleaners. They were my favorite people pretty much at every radio station I've ever. Even when I got to Capital, Global Radio. My favourite people at Capital, at Global, were the guys that worked on reception on the foyer, the Capital foyer, the Global Radio reception area. You know, those are still some of my best mates to this day. I mean, the guys that I worked with on reception at Capital, I could still name them all. You know, Harry McGarry, Roy Nichols, Courtney on downstairs reception in Leicester Square. And I could go on and on and on with other names. You know, these people are still some of my best friends, and they were my favorite people at radio stations. So it's important that people go to a proper radio station if they can and soak up the atmosphere and the people in that radio station, because they actually make you a better broadcaster. And it's not always being around other DJs and producers that makes you a better communicator. It's actually having a laugh and going for a pint with the security guard. So, you know, like one of my best mates at Radio City in Liverpool was our head of security, Mitch Shields, still one of my best friends to this day. They're the people that are the cogs of a radio station. When it goes round and round and round and round, the daily operating of a radio station, they're the most important people, or as important as anybody. The cleaners who have just, if you get the chance to work professionally in a radio station environment, do it. Because, you know, just doing it from home, it's great, and podcasts like this are wonderful. But you cannot, even now to this day, you cannot beat the experience of working in a radio station environment gives you. So my advice, in short, to anybody who's an aspiring broadcaster, keep knocking those doors. Really keep hammering at those doors until they come off and you get an opportunity, because you'll be better for it, and your career will be all the more satisfying because of the time that you've spent in those environments.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. That is. And also, when I walked past the Liverpool building about nearly the tower about 9 years ago, I thought, how do radio presenters get up there?
Well, a lift.
I always thought there was secret stairs, or they had a jetpack.
Well, there are steps in there, because obviously if the lift malfunctions, you've got to be able to get up and down the tower. So there are steps in the tower, but believe you me, you don't want to go up and down those, as I did on one occasion. And it is a very, very famous. I might have done it on a fire drill exercise once as well. But the famous time that I did it, well, it was famous in Liverpool at the time. Do you remember S Club 7?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, there was a member of S Club 7 who became a big solo star as well. She had many hit songs. Rachel Stevens.
I thought it was the other one you were on about, Hannah.
Yeah, no, it wasn't her. It was Rachel Stevens, who probably was the most famous of all of them, because she also had a solo career. And Rachel Stevens was scared of elevators. She couldn't bear lifts. And I was, my show on Radio City for all the time that I was there was the Drive Time show. But I used to cover the breakfast show. And when I covered the breakfast show this particular time, Rachel Stevens and S Club 7 were guests on the breakfast show. They were coming into the breakfast show to be on air live with me. And the producer of the show had to go down the steps of the Radio City Tower. Well, I beg your pardon. No, he caught the lift down to reception at Radio City. But then, because he didn't realize this until he got to reception, that Rachel Stevens was afraid of elevators. She couldn't bear lifts. So whilst the rest of the band jumped in the lift and went back up to the floor where the studios were to be interviewed on my breakfast show, I was sitting in on the breakfast show. Anyway, he had to walk up the steps with Rachel Stevens because she was terrified of the lift. So I had S Club 6 on my show for about 25, 30 minutes because it took that long for Rachel Stevens to come up the steps with my producer, who was completely knackered by the time he got up there. And Rachel Stevens then joined us about half an hour later. Anyway, after 10 o'clock when the show finished, and I went in the studio and recorded something with them for my chart show, which was going out the following Saturday, the rest of the band jumped in the lift and went down to reception. And, you know, the lift took about 25, 30 seconds. I had to spend 25, 30 minutes then walking down the steps with Rachel Stevens to take her back out of reception onto the street in Liverpool. So that is my funny story about the lift, or the lack of using the lift in the Radio City Tower, when I had to walk down the steps with Rachel Stevens after my producer had walked up the steps with Rachel Stevens because she was so terrified of getting into an elevator.
Yeah. What? Yeah. And also, have you ever Have you ever done? There's also lots of radio stations in Radio City in Liverpool and Manchester as well, because now you have Quayside Quarry in Manchester as a radio station.
Yeah. I used to work there. Yeah. I used to do Monday to Friday at the Radio City Tower, and then I used to have a regular Sunday show at Castle Quay in Manchester.
Key
which
103.
Was yes, that
Magic.
was the day. Yeah, it was the days of Key 103 and Magic, and I used to have a show there on a Sunday afternoon, and quite often I used to do Saturdays there, and also I used to do 2 shows a day sometimes. The morning show that used to come from Castle Quay in Manchester on the Magic Network, I used to sometimes sit in on that. I used to cover that, and then I used to finish at 2:00 in the afternoon. I'd jump straight on the M62. And then I'd bomb across to Liverpool, where I'd be on air at 4:00 with the drive time show on Radio City. I did that many, many times. So, yeah, pretty much for the whole time, the 8 years that I was at Radio City, initially in the old Stanley Street building, and then we moved to the Tower a couple of years after that. Pretty much for the whole time that I was in Liverpool, I was also doing shows from Castle Quay in Manchester as well.
And also in Castle Quay, you were one of the Phoenix Nights actors did a show.
He did. Sundays. He used to be. Yeah, he used to be on before me. His name was Justin Morehouse.
Paddy McGuinness did a bit of work for Key 103.
Yeah, that was after my time.
Did you ever meet Justin Morehouse?
Yeah, he used to be on before me, so I used to see him every week.
And also, yeah, because now it's owned by Greatest Hits Radio and.
Yeah, it's owned by Bauer. Yeah, it was always owned by Bauer. It's just in the old days it was called EMAP, and then it changed its name to Bauer. But it's the same. Some of the same management team that are there now were my big bosses when I was there. You know, so
because it's split with Piccadilly at first.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because I knew about the knowledge, and now Bauer's subletting our license in our region, because KCFM became Greatest Hits, but it's subletted by Bauer to still run under the Nation Radio banner. And we have a presenter called Matt Hutchinson.
Right, I don't know him. Was he on KCFM?
Yeah, and he did a bit. He produces for Paul Newman's show, one of Paul Newman's shows.
Right. Okay.
Because KCFM used to be somewhere not far from our new studio at Hull Kingston Radio. It used to be on Woodhouse Street in Hull, Heading Road.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because I remember my friend Paul Woodford, who worked for KCFM, he did a bit of work there.
Oh, was that? That would be after my time, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you had Andy Fee as well, who I know on KCFM, I think.
Yeah, again, he's not one that was there when I was the program director.
Fair enough. And also,
yeah,
you had Rosie Madison, as I say, Steve Jordan.
Yeah, Steve Jordan and Rosie were doing the breakfast show when I first took over.
And Pete Mills did an overnight show, because they're all good people, good presenters. Because Steve Jordan, I love all my guests like Steve Jordan's voice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time ago now, to be honest with you. I worked with Steve Jordan at Viking, but he was on Magic, I think. I was on Viking FM, and so I don't remember hearing him because he was on Magic.
Do you remember Sam Haywood then?
Yeah, well, yeah, of course I do. She was on. I was on the same lineup as her. So when I went to Viking, I did the mid-morning show, and Sam used to come on after me. So I'd be on till 1:00 in the afternoon. She'd follow me, and then I moved to drive time for a little bit before I left, and she would be on before me. So she would hand over to me at 4:00. So yes, I do know her. Yes, Sam, Very, very nice lady.
And there was also
I
a guy who worked in news, who now works for the BBC News channel, Darren Leatham said, Ed Thomas.
Don't remember him. I'm pretty clear on my memories of Viking. I worked with Foxy and Tom, did the breakfast show, and they were pals of mine, good mates of mine. I used to, socialise with them. So they very much looked after me when I went to Viking. So they were on before me.
Do you know Jim then? Coulson.
Who?
Jim Coulson.
Yeah, he was there. Yeah, he wasn't on the daytime lineup. He used to do the weekends, I think. So it was Foxy and Tom. Then I would come on. Then Sam Hayward, and then a really, really lovely guy by the name of Mark Summers. Then would do the drive time show.
He now works in he worked in Egypt.
Yeah, and I brought Mark to KCFM when I was at KCFM. I brought him onto the team for a bit, and he was really great for me. Actually, he did a really good job for me. So he did the drive time show, and then in the evening, I think we had a guy called Paul somebody or other who did the evening show. No. I know Paul Carrington very well, but I didn't work at Viking with Paul Carrington. I worked at Signal with Paul Carrington. I think we had a guy in the evening. Was it Paul Foster or something like that?
Yeah, and also you had. I'm trying to remember his name. Who worked at Signal? Raymond Rose.
I've met him, but I didn't work with him. But I have met him. We also had at Viking a guy who I then ended up working at Global with in London. We worked in Leicester Square together, but we first worked together at Viking, and his name was Dan. Trying to remember his surname.
Morfitt.
Dan O'Connell. Dan O'Connell.
He used to work on Galaxy.
Yeah, well, I think he left Viking to go to Galaxy, and for many years now he's been on XFM and Radio X at Global in London. So he and I worked.
And he was briefly on the days when I used to listen to Absolute.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, he was a good guy. I got on very well with him in Hull. I didn't work with him for very long, and then there I am at Global Radio one day doing my show on Gold, and this guy walks into the studio. I thought, oh, he looks familiar, and he said, Shaun, and I said, hello. I said, where do I know you from? He said, it's Dan O'Connell. He said, we were at Viking together. I said, yes, of course, Dan. I said, how are you? How are you keeping? I said, so you're working here now? He said, yeah. He said, I'm on XFM, which became Radio X. And anyway, once I knew he was there, I would have a coffee with him and see him quite often, because Global's a big building, and unless you know somebody's there, then they could quite easily be there and you not know. But then eventually, once you bump into somebody once, you keep on bumping into them. Then 2 or 3 times a week. So anyway, he was at Viking when I was there as well. But as I said, my friends weren't just the DJs. I had great friends in sales and promotions and things like that. And security particularly. I very, very much like security guards. Security guards are great.
Brilliant. That's it for today. Thank you for joining us, Shaun.
It's a pleasure.
Do join me again soon for another Chatbox podcast. But for now, please give it up for the legendary Shaun Tilley.
Oh, bless you, Ben. Thanks ever so much. Thank you very much indeed for letting me guest on your podcast. It's been an absolute privilege and a sheer delight. Thank you, my friend.
Do join me again soon for another podcast. But for now, thank you for watching and listening. And that's a wrap. Episode 29 of the Chatbox podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it filled some gaps in your time. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, been brilliant with Shaun Tilley as my guest today. So yeah, brilliant. He's a brilliant presenter, Shaun Tilley. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. My next interview, episode 40, will be with Stuart Nicholson. So stick around for that, and I'll talk to you in a bit. Some more intros and outros coming. Bye.